Hello and welcome to session 296 in the AISafety.com reading group. Tonight we'll be discussing LLMs for alignment research, a research priority by Abram Dembski. Abram Dembski is a researcher at the Machine Intelligence Research Institute. He is described as currently completing a PhD in computer science at the University of Southern California, which is somewhat funny in that he was also doing that when we started something like 8 years ago, and I think definitely is the right choice to, like, you get all the signaling value from starting a PhD and not so much for finishing it. So I think that is probably a very good choice. This is a post on Alignment Forum and it's a couple of months old. Hold on, let me just get my taskbar gone. Okay, so we start with a reference to a short story called Scale Was All We Needed at First by Gabriel Maboko. And it describes an AI doom scenario, which is, I hadn't read it before and I think it's pretty good actually. It's reasonably close to my mainline scenario of how things will shake out, but there are a couple of important differences I'll go through later. The interesting part of this that Abram Dembski highlights is that new developments in LLMs allow LLMs to accelerate capabilities research without a correspondingly large acceleration in safety research. And this is the part of this small story that Abram Dembski believes is quite close to the situation we are in right now. There are, however, a number of ways that our situation or my expectation of our future differs from Gabriel Maboko's scenario. The first is, of course, that this is a really short timeline scenario. So that is an obvious difference. I believe it's probably going to be longer. It heavily implies that a paradigm change is about to happen that will dramatically change things, and I don't think that is really necessary, that assumption. It has hacking as a reasonably central part of why things go wrong, and that seems unlikely. And of course we have the classic fiction trope of an somehow incompetent superintelligence, and that seems really strange, but you have to do that in order to make a good story. Okay, so Abram Dembski doesn't bury the lead, but puts his proposed safety precaution up front and center, which is as follows. Frontier models should be more useful for safety research than capability research, both within labs and for the public. So this seems like, this is obviously a proposed rule, and the line that more useful for A than for B is, to my mind, somewhat arbitrary, because sometimes in some worlds the alignment problem is really easy and then we don't need to do that. In some worlds the alignment problem turned out to be really hard and then we die even though we follow this precaution. In that way it's a somewhat arbitrary line, but on the other hand it's a really nice shelling point in that you say this A should be larger than B. That's a nice easy thing to communicate, and it also has the big advantage that this is something that is somewhat out of reach, meaning that a political process could decide to implement a precaution like that, and that would help substantially, but not be completely impossible to reach. So from a political perspective, I like it quite a lot. It also has the advantage that we can probably verify, well, we can verify half of it, as far as I can tell, like how useful is it for safety research and capability research that is so far away from the cutting edge that the general public can do that. So that's a big advantage of this proposal. I don't know if anyone have actually tried to systematically measure how useful safety research is. These models are for safety research or capability research. I would think some way of measuring this would be possible, even if somewhat imperfectly. So if you have a large language model, you can ask for help with programming, and if you do that, you can also ask for help with alignment. if you ask for help with programming, what you're actually asking the AI to do is to, often asking the AI to do is that you have some kind of specification in natural language and you want to formalize that into a programming language. And the output you get is pretty good, pretty competent. Like sometimes there is some bad code, but then you can say, okay, you have forgot to check against injection attacks, and then say, oops, yeah, let me just fix that up, and eventually it ends up getting pretty good, actually. And in particular, if it's something that you don't know very much about, then this can be a substantial help. One thing in particular is that Claude 3 seems to be better, and GPT-4 seems to be worse than Claude 2 for programming tasks, and also for alignment for that matter. I think that's something that was quite a bit of an update for me. I've been just using ChatGPT for convenience because in theory Claude is banned in the EU. I think there are ways around that, but it's just been more convenient for me to use ChatGPT, and it's quite possible that I should change. Right, then let's talk about if you try to ask the AI that you to translate some of your natural language descriptions of how alignment should work and what corrigibility should be into some kind of formal mathematical specification. If you do that, Abram Demski claims that you get basically garbage, which is quite a difference. It seems that these kind of mathematical philosophical tasks are just things that the models can't really do. And obviously, the kind of tasks that someone like Abram Demski poses to the models are very different in that maybe, I don't know how good a programmer he is, maybe he's a really bad programmer, and the kind of tasks he needs help with are things that are really easy in some sense, whereas if he's one of the best alignment researchers in the world, then probably mathematical philosophical tasks are like really difficult. And I think that is probably true in a strong sense, but I don't think that matters that much, because in order to evaluate how good quality is this alignment research that is being done by the model, you can in fact evaluate quite well as long as you are on a level above. It's always hard to evaluate research done at a level above yours, but you can totally evaluate lower down, and I think Abram Demski might be really well situated to do that. So why can't it do mathematical philosophy? Well, there are some reasons. I've divided them into fundamental a priori reasons and practical reasons. If we start with the fundamental reasons, the first is, if Claude could do mathematical philosophy, well, we would all be dead. So I kind of like these kind of anthropic arguments, but I think it needs to be really unpacked quite a bit. Like, if Claude was really good at mathematical philosophy, precisely how would the world be different in such a way that we would be dead? Well, the obvious thing is that mathematical philosophy would be really useful for capability, and that it would have allowed Claude to do recursive self-improvement and do a takeover or something like that. But if that turns out to actually be true, that mathematical philosophy is really useful for capability, then much of the point of this this kind of work seems to like, what precisely is the point? Because if we make it better at mathematical philosophy, such that it's impossible to make it better at alignment compared to capability, then there's basically no hope for this approach, as far as I can tell. There are a number of other reasons why less data, why we should not expect it to be as good as alignment research, right? Because there's just a lot less training data, and it's just a harder topic, and like very few people can do that at a high level compared to the number of people who can do basic programming tasks. The practical experience of trying to do mathematical philosophy with these models is that it's bland, it's people pleasing, it always says, "Oh, you're so smart," which is actually really annoying to me. And it's very happy to summarize your things back. It doesn't really add much, doesn't critique much, and bases its reasoning more on vibes than logic. In general, I share these observations. It loves to summarize things back, and it's always say, "I'm so smart," and I really dislike that. It feels sycophantic. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that. Is there a way we can actually do better? Well, we can, in fact, at least we can experiment with this, because we mostly don't have any risk of making things worse by using frontier models for this. I think in general I would agree there are many ways this can be wrong. I think Abramdemsky just highlighted one, in that if you get better using frontier models, you might accidentally push more on capabilities. But in general, I agree that a lot of things are possible now that were not possible a year ago, and now is a good time to explore. We can explore with prompts and fine-tuning. That's perhaps the most obvious. We can attach LLMs to theorem provers. I believe Jacques Thibetot is doing some work with precisely that. And in general, explore the possibilities a bit more systematically than what we're doing now. He will give some more examples later. So one of the key considerations is how much autonomy should we expect these LLMs to have in alignment research. The dichotomy that Abramdemsky puts up is to have it either as a servant or as a collaborator. And we really don't like these long generic answers that you get, like ChatGPT is very good at bullshitting, basically. And active listening is much more what we want. There is a bias towards leaning towards autonomy in AI in general, and that's something that's easier to train, it's easier to think of, and for the people in charge of the corporate budgets, it's more appealing. I think there's an element of cope in it as well, in the sense that like if you don't know how to do alignment research, then the conclusion seems kind of bad, but then you can say, oh, we can just have the AI do it, and then you use that as a kind of thought-ending cliche, and then you don't actually think more about that. And it's some kind of hope that this is the thing that could work, but it's also a hope that's not really based on anything seriously. And of course, as Goran says, tool AI want to be agent AI, because it's a lot more convenient if it just straight up does the thing that we want. Abramdemsky distinguishes three notions of alignment. The first is a utilitarianism-based notion of alignment, where this is basically the more consequentialist the AI is able to reason, the more aligned it gets. I sometimes refer to this as prison inmate alignment, where you do in fact get like better results in some narrow utilitarian way, which is probably not really the thing you want, as the AI becomes more capable of doing consequentialist reasoning. Corrigibility is the second notion, which unfortunately seems to be stalled right now. I still believe it's our best hope. And the third that Abramdemsky introduces is capabilitarianism, which is to increase the agency of humans. This can both be like cyborgism, but also things like raising the sanity waterline. And the example that Abramdemsky uses is utilitarianism is to capabilitarianism as Facebook is to Wikipedias and the nanny state is to liberal governments. I think to some extent this kind of examples helps me clarify what he means by capabilitarianism, and especially utilitarianism in this context. But I also feel these are some very related normative related loaded terms. Abramdemsky's next point is that we need to have an independent safety approach, so the snake doesn't eat its own tail. Because if you have an fully automated alignment research process that don't have humans as part of the loop, then that is probably going to be a bad idea. The example is OpenAI Super Alignment, which hopes to automate AI safety research, using AI to accelerate the process of using AI to accelerate using AI to ad infinitum, just to and this is a kind of infinite recursion that lacks any kind of grounding and potentially lacks any kind of human input. And Abramdemsky has an intuition that this is something that will end poorly. I also agree it will end poorly, but I'm less confident that lack of grounding will be the reason for failure. So the general idea is that we should try to make LLMs that are useful for alignment researchers who are doing other things than making LLMs useful for alignment research, to avoid this kind of loop. Abraham Dembski has a reasonably, moderately, somewhat concrete proposal, which is an engineer-researcher collaboration in trying to make LLMs useful for capability research. And the idea is that there's some kind of pairing between AI safety researchers and generative AI engineers. So there's a loop where the engineers make tools that might be useful, and AI safety researchers try to actually use the tools and provide some kind of feedback. And this is a process that can potentially scale fractally, in the sense that you can do it with like single people, so you have one AI engineer and one AI safety researcher, and you can have a team of researchers working with a team of engineers and organizations, etc. And a comparison could be with Stampy, AI safety.info's LLM, but Stampy is I'm actually not entirely sure this is true, but it's claimed that Stampy is mostly curating the answers, but the conversation styles, things like verbosity, isn't something that really is being worked on. I don't actually know if that's true. So the idea is, can we, these kind of teams, both build object level knowledge about AI safety and also process level knowledge about what kind of attributes should the conversations have? What are good prompts, etc. So the obvious thing that I would expect at this point would be for Abraham Dembski to, like he says he's done some experiments with this, like what is the best prompt he's come up with, and in the comments he says he doesn't in fact have a really good system prompt, but trying to work on one. So I will get back to this point later in my presentation. So, deep learning and obviously the pre-training of the GPTs is a really data-hungry process. But if you need to fine-tune, then you actually need not that much data compared to, of course, the original amounts. It's still a lot, unfortunately, and in particular, the large models can't really be fine-tuned by researchers outside of the major AI labs, and that is in fact a problem. One example of this kind of fine-tuning is Claude, and that's I don't have very much experience with Claude, but I believe Abraham Dembski has a lot more about it. And one thing he claims is that it's trained to explain constitutional AI. I was surprised by this fact. I looked at the description of constitutional AI and Claude, and I couldn't find this fact. I don't disagree. I think it's probably true. But I was somewhat surprised. And this has an interesting effect. Claude is actively enthusiastic about constitutional AI, tries to talk about it all the time, and if people say, like, put question marks on whether Anthropic is actually doing the right thing, then it becomes defensive, and I think this is a potentially really important problem if it's doing AI research in a explicitly biased way. I think that is highly problematic and also somewhat surprising to me. The feedback tools that we have from the AI safety researcher to the generative AI engineer. Right now we have like a thumbs up and a thumbs down, and we need something more, both on the quality of the specific facts that the AI produces and also the interaction style. And this needs to be much richer than thumbs up and thumbs down. And it would be really nice if we could like adjust some sliders for verbosity and something like that, and then see how does the output change in response to this. Abraham Dembski has an example he calls reconstitutional AI, and the user interface would be something where the user, the AI safety researcher, selects a part of the reply that he's not happy with, and the AI generates a couple of examples of corrections, and then the users say this one is much better and use that, and then the AI changes the constitution to something that would cause that to be more likely to be picked, and then there are a couple of ways the constitution can be changed, and perhaps one of them is one the user changes, and then it generates a couple of examples to show the impact, and then there's some kind of finalizing process. I think this is an example of a user interface. What I would probably more like, rather than corrections, I would like to generate meta level descriptions of what could be wrong. For instance, saying like not just so you can choose between A and B, but the meta level description is something like this is too verbose, or this is like stupid, or something like that. Abraham Dembski also said it would be really nice to have some explicit tools for the consequences of fine-tuning, and I think that would be in fact be really neat, and I'm unaware of any such tools in existence. So what I did, this is the end of Abraham Dembski's article. So what I thought was I would make a GPT. I would make a a GPT is kind of like a system prompt thing. It's a bit more than just a system prompt, but I'm calling it the AI Safety Research Collaborator. It is in fact public, so if you type in this URL, you can find it. And this is most of what I've tried to describe here, and it's not really like this is very much based on Abraham Dembski's description of what is wrong, but I also have some of my my own ideas about it. And where I try to say, oh, it needs to be formal and to the point, and all these kind of things. And then I also describe a bit more about like my personal research process. That the first thing I do is to do some actual research, figure out like who else has written about this topic, and then I usually babble, write just a huge text and try to get something up, and in this case I would like the research collaborator to clean it up and formalize it, and then critique the ideas, and here I really want the AI to be frank about the problems, and then generate new ideas and think out of the box. So let's see how that works out in practice. The first thing I do is like if I needed to take some kind of alignment proposal, and even though it's not precisely mathematical philosophy, then I talked about this safety proposal, and then I asked it for examples of people talking about similar things previously, and it gave you a long answer, very verbose unfortunately, even though I explicitly told it not to be verbose, with a lot of examples. And at the end of the very long answer it says, actually no, I couldn't find anything that looked very much like this before. So I wasn't really happy with the outcome of this. Then for the next thing, I tried to describe a informal formalization of Abraham Dembski's principle, and then I put in like the way I actually do this in practice. I don't know if this is interesting for you. There is something called the world's most dangerous writing app, where you can where you start writing, set like 5 minutes, and then if you don't write anything for like 5 seconds, then it deletes everything. That's a great way for me to write a lot, and then I just babble quite a bit, and then I put it in with please summarize, and try to formalize this, and then it summarizes. It always summarizes well, and I think that was pretty good. It also added formatting and so much, but very little formalizing, unfortunately. So yeah, it's certainly better than nothing, but it doesn't really do much to improve on this. So I ask you to criticize my approach, this long approach that I just gave it, and like what are the potential problems, and then it finds 15 potential problems, and it's a decent list, but unfortunately as I read through these 15 points, none of them really got through what I thought was like my central objection to this. And then I try to tell it the actual problem with my attempt at formalization is that I'm not really measuring the thing I'm interested in, and how big a problem is this, could it be resolved, and then it tries to give some examples, and a lot of it is bad. There were a couple of things in its comments on my approach that like seemed like the kind of things that were in fact somewhat useful. So, based on this experiment, is it a good idea to use LLMs for as a collaborator for alignment research? I don't really have a strong conclusion. It's certainly better than a rubber duck. Like you can tell the classic programming technique where you just explain your problem to a rubber duck, and then the process of doing that can help you quite a bit. So my expectation is that people should try it, see if it works for you. And I think also, like, the system prompt that I made is one that can be improved quite a bit and probably is idiosyncratic to me, and maybe other people have different processes, and maybe some of them work better for other people. Yeah, so that is all I have for today. Thank you, and see you in 2 weeks.